Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. I'm Surya Gangadharan. The media reports have been rife with stories about China buying huge quantities of grain, including rice and wheat, corn, from overseas. And the obvious reason being given is that there are shortages there because of floods and other natural disasters. I have with me Atul Aneja, formerly with The Hindu. He was their correspondent in Beijing for many years. And he brings to us a certain insight into how China works and what happens there. Atul, thank you and welcome.
You're welcome, Surya.
So, first off, is China self-sufficient otherwise in food production?
Yes, mostly yes. When it comes to basics such as wheat, rice, peanuts, soya, I mean the basic Chinese diet, I think they're quite okay. I wouldn't say entirely self-sufficient because the total arable land area of China is not as much, let's say, when you compare it with India or the US. But they have worked hard on their agriculture. And so the productivity, soil productivity is pretty good. So while they may not be 100% self-sufficient, but they're not bad. I mean, they've also got good warehousing capacity. So whenever they've had a bumper crop, I mean, the food doesn't rot in their warehouses. So that is also available with them. So the infrastructure is good. Irrigation is okay. Though the land area is smaller, fairly self-sufficient. Nothing critically short in terms of food grains in normal times.
So, based on your experience there and what you read, do you feel that the current floods and all that we are seeing in China, has it seriously hit their grain production?
I think so. It has taken a hit, but that's not the only reason. Now let's if you really look at their farming area, what has been hit is the Yangtze River belt. Now then if you look at the map, you'll see the Yangtze River really effectively from Chongqing in the north right up to Shanghai in the south. So it's like a spine which goes through, and on either side of the Yangtze is basically the agriculture belt of China, or one section. Other is along the Yellow River, but this is really which has been very badly hit by these floods. So obviously, since farmlands have gone under a deluge, it is naturally going to result in lesser availability of food. So that is a factor which has come in. But I think beyond that, there are other factors which are coming in putting pressure on the farms. And if I can quickly raise those issues, one has been that a lot of the farmland has gone into urban development. So you see industry coming on arable areas big time.
Mm-hmm.
And you also see the housing, the real estate developers coming in and encroaching on the arable land. But that is market-driven phenomena which has been taking place. Second thing is that people don't want to do too much of farming because it doesn't give them the returns as a job in a city or in an industrial plant would give you. So as a result, the farming community has sort of shrunk in China. So not too many people are on the farm, even though mechanization has come in, but still farm hands are lesser than it used to be earlier. So these are other factors which are coming in which makes farming less attractive. What is the third thing as a result? What has happened is that, large farms which would give you a high productivity, where give you economies of scale, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
The size of the farms is coming down. So that is another problem because the land area available for farming is shrinking. So the size of the farms is coming low. And that is also, in a way, hampering domestic food production. But the income levels have gone higher. So your capacity to import food is much more than it used to be. Historically, China has had a food issue. And, and recently, 1959 was a great famine when Mao tried his great leap forward experiment. Turned out to be a disaster, and millions of farmers died as a result of that. So that's where we are. Apart from the flood issue, which has come in, and other natural factors, there are other structural issues which have come into naturally with the way China has developed or its model of development, which has put pressure on the farmland and therefore in terms of food production.
So has that made them vulnerable in a sense, or they are confident they can do it? They have the financial resources, and they are let's face it, they're also superpower.
Yeah, I think there is no panic situation over there because you have the money to buy food. And the geopolitical situation is not so bad as to countries are not going to sell you food. And here I'm talking in terms, even in the context of the Americans, despite all the Cold War which has started between US and China, you do see US exports going into China because that is Trump's basic area, Iowa and Ohio, and those are the food production areas. And he doesn't want that they don't have a market to sell in an election year. So even though the situation, the political friction between the two has increased enormously, the food supply chain has really not been affected. So I don't think they will have a critical problem in terms of imports. But yes, it would be a problem because you don't want to rely too much on imports. And so all depends on how much of your domestic food supply has been hit. If it is not hit beyond 50%, I don't think they're going to have a problem. So instead of 100, you get 60% of food and rest imports, that's fine. But if these other factors which we spoke about, if those get reduced, I mean, food production goes below 50 or say 40%, then your reliance on imports increases by that much more. And then I don't think you're going to be comfortable about it. Domestic issues will come in. People are going to question your model. Factions within the parties are going to put blame on you. So there are all kinds of other factors which will come in if your domestic supply is not above a certain threshold.
So the current floods, how badly do you think they've affected grain production?
I'm not, Surya, to be very honest, I'm not exactly sure how much percentage would it have affected. The floods have been bad. There is no doubt about it that has been a big issue. And it's been hit, your area around Three Gorges Dam, basically, and then south of that, when you come towards Wuhan, and then Zhengzhou. These are the major areas which have been hit by the floods. Now, but to get an exact fix on, say, how many million tons of food grain would have been impacted, I don't have that data. But given the scale and the pictures which we see, I think it's pretty bad. It is pretty bad. So I will not be surprised if the figures are quite high in terms of the crop damage that these floods have caused.
Understand even there's a shortage of pork.
That's been a big problem. You see, that has been linked to other things. Like, for example, when swine flu came, so again, your domestic consumption of pork, domestic production of pork got reduced quite drastically. And you see the transition. Pork is kind of a staple in the Chinese diet. And this is not just traditional, but, Mao came, when he came in, he was the one, he said, if you want protein, then go for pork. So it has been promoted big time, and it's part of the diet chain now. And when I was in China, that if you go to a supermarket and the area which is selling you pork and other meats, you find a lot of large crowds of Chinese flocking towards that. In fact, that the piggery and their diet in Chinese are becoming taller these days. If you go in a subway, you will find them much more taller people than probably you would have had in 1960s. So pork feeds into this, overall diet. And this has been a problem since the time of the swine flu. It was not normalized when I left a few months ago. One of the countries they are importing, I believe, is the United States. Again, pork. If you go to a Walmart in China, so you see at this meat section, a lot of imports from Tyson and others. The Americans are the ones which are also important in terms of their pork. And pork is politically sensitive, And if you don't get that, then it breeds a certain resentment. And the Communist Party of China is very, very sensitive to that. So they make everything possible, whether you need it from Vietnam or other neighboring countries, from Thailand, anywhere. So this is just not diet, but it's a very politically sensitive topic as well, the availability of pork. Yet they have... Sorry, go on. Sorry.
Tell me, is food ration there? Do you have some kind of a, subsidized kind of system there?
I'm not sure, Surya, because I didn't, in cities like Beijing, one didn't see that. But I won't be surprised that that tradition still lives on, because like us, this ration card business and, supermarkets sort of selling, like our Janta Bazaars, which we used to have, that system did remain, like state-controlled cooperative sort of stores. They are still there in parts of Beijing. I could see that. So I will not be surprised if this ration card business of each family, how much I think that also got linked with the population thing. Once they wanted single child, so if you have more than one child, then your availability of rations,
Comes
which is
down.
state-sponsored, that would also get reduced. So I
Mhm.
will be surprised if that has been abolished. But since it's become such a market society, at least in the big cities, you don't see that. You just see people. There's so much of it seems so much. Everything is so plentiful. People go from all classes and just buy food and go. So I don't see that ration culture anymore. But I'm told that those who have lived there earlier, some journalists who have been old timers there, that it used to be a problem. You had only certain stores which could send you, and then they had this interesting concept called friendship stores, where
Mhm.
foreigners could buy, imported stuff which used to be exorbitantly heavy. Those friendship stores, some of them still are there in pockets of Beijing.
So, have you noticed any significant price rise? Is the local media talking about it?
They do. They do. Price size is again sensitive, and there is a reasonable amount of inflation. What inflation did come about a few months ago, which I saw firsthand, was on pork prices. They had gone much higher, and there were no bread riots or something which we saw in the late Soviet Union queues, outside sort of butcheries. But it was very much headline news about price rises, not so much on vegetables and fruits, but on pork, as we discussed earlier, that's a very sensitive issue. But that was something on meats and pork especially. There is a price sensitivity, and the prices had gone higher at that time. I suspect it would be the case now as well, given the overall food shortage. In fact, when you have less grain availability, probably people will shift to the meats, and since the demand will be more, it probably will rise. It should be there right now, but I don't have the numbers right away as to how much is the inflation on food.
How serious is the possibility of social unrest if there is a shortage of food or prices go beyond a certain point?
Uh, well, uh, it depends on geographies, because I think the Chinese system is such that they'll make sure that the cities are well supplied.
Yeah.
So if there is an issue, it might happen in some of the poorer provinces of China, which would be southwest, Sichuan, Guizhou. These are Yunnan, part of that. So
Mhm.
there could be something, but even if there are, I doubt it'll hit the cities, and therefore it will be widely reported in China. They would make sure that there's not enough media, sort of, since media is so controlled. Except for foreign media, domestic media is not going to make that kind of a noise. But having said that, I don't think it will reach that. They'll make sure that the imports are there before it reaches that level of criticality as to cause unrest. So after all, it's a very controlled society. They would be right now monitoring the pulse of the people, exactly how much is the, displeasure or unhappiness about the current situation, and whether do they expect it to go beyond a threshold in terms of street protests. So they would do that preventive work before through imports. So I very much doubt, especially Xi Jinping in the present state of vulnerability, even factions within China, he will be
Yeah.
extra sensitive, and that it doesn't reach that kind of a threshold where people spill out into the roads.
Mhm. Do you recall any time in the time when you were there, when there was any issues about food leading to demonstrations in the streets?
No, no. I think that era is gone. We had that in the 50s and 60s, but I think post Deng Xiaoping, after 75, 80, they have sorted this problem. So they don't allow critical shortage. Things which were agitating the people and causing them to really come out. It were things like pollution, environment. These were the big issues which were causing a lot of people. And documentaries were being made about that, which got shown in some of the CCTV, that is your the state-controlled media, but were taken off. It showed on the internet in Weibo and other, the equivalent of Twitter and Facebook. So those were the issues which were agitating people. I think food issue was no longer the issue which was causing resentment against the state.
Last question. You mentioned that a lot of arable land is being taken over for urban development. I'm surprised in a society like that, in a political setup like that, where there are such strict controls on, I presume there are strict controls on land and where you can build and all that. Is that in a sense now relaxed to a point where, it's a kind of free for all?
Yeah, it has been relaxed to a great extent. This is part of the Deng Xiaoping's reforms of allowing the
Okay.
market to play its hand, and that remains. In fact, the reasons why there are less farmland available is because or less farming done is because the farmers are migrating because of market situation into more
Yeah.
lucrative jobs. So you buying land is not so much of an issue, arable land as well. But it would kick in at some point if the state senses that it is going to lead to long-term food shortages or long-term impairment of the agriculture sector. Even while they modernize it, there would be curbs which would coming in. But essentially, it's a market-driven phenomena which has come in. And after the 2008 crisis, financial crisis, when China really started putting in a lot of money to revive the economy, actually pull up the world economy, a lot of that money went into real estate, which was encouraged. So, demand for cement, glass, etc. was raised so much, it artificially raised the economy to a great extent. Though it created bubbles, but it was state-driven at that time, go for real estate kind of construction. So you do have that phenomenon of ghost towns. We can talk about it some other time, where a lot of construction has come in and nobody to buy the houses. Yes, ghost cities have emerged, but this is the 2008 onwards, which was encouraged. The real estate sector was encouraged, and infrastructure, roads, even whether you required it or not. So huge money went into infrastructure, bridges, railways, and housing at that point of time, and which all requires land. So, there was no sort of a stringent measures to make sure that arable land remains strictly controlled. Also, there was a confidence that, food issue has been basically resolved. But I think there would be a change of thinking now, especially with the flooding and other issues, to make some structural adjustments to the policy which has been prevailing here, as I said, since Deng Xiaoping's time.
And those collective farms of those days, they're all dismantled, gone?
They have been dismantled because they have been, proven disasters. we are talking about Cultural Revolution days, and where millions and millions of people have died. And in fact, China is completely market-oriented now in terms of the economy. Though there are controls which come in different ways, the state does it. But there's no way are they going back to those collectivization kind of experiments, which Mao actually took from Stalin in some way, which was a disaster in Siberia, but it was probably a bigger disaster in China. So they turned their back on that. So I don't see that coming out. Technology will come in, agriculture, smart agriculture, use of technology into that, irrigation systems, though that's a trajectory which they are taking right now. But I think collectivization and all, that's passing.
Atul Aneja, pleasure to listen to you. Great insight, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Surya. Always a pleasure to talk to you.